What's up, everybody? Today it is party time on the Hipster Tactical channel, as in the Communist Party. Because today, my East German Makarov, made in 1962, is turning 60. So, happy birthday, little guy. Alright, the Makarov, and this is an East German example. Today it is turning 60, and I guess I don't know for sure if today was the day it was made, but it was made in 1962, and it is 2022 today, so I was never great at math, but by my simple subtraction, this thing is 60 this year. And I figure it's kind of like a dog. You have a rough idea of you know how old the thing is, and you just pick a day. So we will pick today as the day to celebrate the birth of this fine little pistol. So I'm sure if you're into guns, you know something about the Makarov. You know it's kind of like the quintessential gun from communism, and you find Makarovs from Bulgaria, from Russia, from China, and East Germany. I think people tend to like these guns to some degree, but they're generally seen as a collector's item, kind of a relic from the Cold War, from a bygone era, and they are that. They are certainly a piece of history. This one certainly is, but they're also really good little guns, and that's kind of what I want to talk about, through the lens of the history and background of this gun. I want to talk about the fact that it is, I think, a nice gun, and I think in many ways still a relevant gun, still a useful gun. And would it be something you want to carry in 2022? Maybe. And as we discuss that, maybe you will find that answer for yourself, depending on what you're looking for in a carry gun. So the story of the Makarov really begins with the story of the Cold War. And shortly after World War II, as the ideological tensions between East and West began to intensify, the Soviets really began to examine what they needed in a handgun. And obviously they had probably the largest military machine in history at that point. They were going to need a handgun that could arm millions of people, not only in the USSR, but in their various satellite countries throughout their sphere of influence in the Eastern Bloc. And to them, the handgun was a defensive tool. It didn't have to be big, it didn't have to be heavy, it didn't have to have a ton of power. And given that, they decided to go with a straight blowback system, a fixed barrel system. And, a fixed barrel, I'll show you in my Mac here, the fixed barrel is affixed to the frame, and there is no unlocking, no tilting, no falling block, no rotating. The barrel is just fixed. And obviously that greatly simplifies the manufacture and the complexity of the gun, but it also limits the amount of pressure and power the handgun can handle. So generally, like a 9mm Parabellum, the 9mm that we're used to, is too powerful for a fixed barrel straight blowback system. Same with 45 and 40 and a lot of the calibers we are used to here. The 380 and the 32 are really intended for a fixed barrel design. So the Soviets didn't think they needed anything more powerful than what a straight blowback system could handle. And I think it's probably safe to say they looked to the Walther PP series, which were, compact, well-made, reliable fixed-barrel guns that were prevalent throughout World War II with the Germans. So I think they saw that as kind of a point of inspiration. But taking that, they designed an entirely new pistol with a lot of new, unique features. So the Soviets, being the pragmatic bunch that they were, they wanted to get their most bang for the buck out of a fixed barrel straight blowback system. So they developed a new round that could really maximize the ballistic potential without needing a locked breech mechanism, like a tilting barrel or a falling block or even a rotating barrel. So they actually took inspiration from another round that was developed in Germany in the 1930s called the 9mm Ultra, and that was what that intended to do, to kind of give you the most ballistic potential out of a fixed barrel. So they kind of took that as inspiration and developed their own round, which became the 9x18 Makarov round. The 9x18 Makarov round is actually a little bit wider than capitalist 9mm cartridges, because I think the Russians measured the diameter of the bullet a little differently from a different point of reference. So the 9x18 Makarov will not chamber in 9mm guns that we have in the West, or 380 guns. And I've heard that was kind of intentional, because if there was ever some kind of invasion of Western Europe, which I think a lot of people back then thought was likely, NATO would not be able to use the Soviet ammunition in their guns. So makes sense. Anyway, so beginning in the late 40s, they began to look at handgun designs, fixed barrel designs, to chamber this new 9x18 cartridge that they had developed loosely based on the German 9mm Ultra. So a fairly long list of Russian Soviet designers participated in these pistol trials in the late 40s. Interestingly, based on what I could find, Mikhail Kalashnikov was not involved in any of these handgun trials. I guess he was probably busy with the AK-47 around that same time, but the design from a guy named Nikolai Fyodorovich Makarov was found to be the most reliable, the most durable, and the simplest design. And I read some statistic that it was 20 times more reliable. His design was 20 times more reliable than the competing designs. And who knows how they defined that metric, but suffice to say, I'm sure, and as history bears out, this is a very reliable gun. So I'm sure that was the case. This is a great design from a reliability standpoint. By 1948, they kind of chose that design. They refined it over the next few years, and by 1951, it was formally adopted by the Soviet Union and really became the official handgun of communism. So the Soviets set up tooling in Izhevsk. I hope I said that right. And shortly thereafter, they also set up Makarov tooling in Seoul, East Germany, and Bulgaria, and in China. So they were making the Pistolet Makarova, this exact gun, in all 4 of those locations. Now, there were other guns made in 9x18 Makarov, like the Polish P64 and P83, the CZ82 and 83, the Hungarian guns, PA63, I think. But those are not true Makarov pistols. They are not Pistolet Makarovas. This is sometimes called the PM, just for short, for Pistolet Makarova, which means Makarov's pistol, I think, in Russian. This was one that was made in East Germany, as previously pointed out. And the East German Makarovs kind of have a reputation for having a nicer fit and finish than some of the Bulgarian ones and the ones made in Russia. And I haven't actually owned or shot a Bulgarian Mac or a Russian Mac or a Chinese Mac, but I will say this is a really nice pistol, and to me it really does live up to that reputation of having a superior fit and finish. And I don't know if you can see it here through the camera, but the bluing on this gun is really nice. You can see it just kind of shimmer and sparkle there when you turn it into the light. And it's 60 years old, so it has a few nicks and scuffs on it, but by and large this thing is in great shape for its age, and it's still a pretty gun, I think. The bluing on this is really as nice as just about any other thing I've had. Maybe the bluing on my Walther P88 Compact is maybe a little richer, it has a bluer hue to it. This is a little darker, I guess, but really a nice gun. And just the fit and the feel, the slide is nice and tight without feeling too tight, and everything just fits together very well. The small parts are really well made. They're big and beefy. The trigger feels pretty good, the single action trigger, and I'm clear here, so I'm gonna dry fire it. Single action trigger's nice. It's got a nice snap. Double action is not bad. It's better than some double action guns, modern guns I've found. Maybe not quite as good as like a Smith & Wesson 3rd Gen or a nice SIG, but it's good. You can't say it's not when you handle the Makarov. And I think this goes for most straight blowback pistols that kind of use this low profile slide design. And when you design a straight blowback pistol, a lot of them, it eliminates the need for a separate guide rod that rides under the barrel, because the barrel's not tilting or moving or doing anything. So you can basically, as you saw when I took it apart, wind the barrel, or I'm sorry, the spring around the barrel. So that allows it to have a really low bore axis. You can just lower the point at which the barrel's mounted in the gun, and it sits very low in your hand. And in my written review, I talk about how it kind of feels like you have a separate index finger when you hold this thing, and that's something I do experience in other blowback pistols like a Walther PPK or a SIG P230. So it's well made and it has a nice feel. And one thing I think is a lot of people forget about with these old school fixed barrel straight blowback guns is that they are very accurate. A fixed barrel makes a very accurate gun. And we're talking about accuracy in guns that we're more familiar with today, like 1911s. You always talk about the lockup, like how tight does it lock to the barrel? That's what determines your accuracy. Well, this thing has a tighter lockup than the most expensive 1911 there is, because it's literally fixed to the frame. So that is taken care of with this. You've got as tight of a lockup as you can get in a gun because it's fixed. And certainly you do have limits in terms of like I said, you're not going to be able to shoot 9mm Parabellum through this. But I think that accuracy that you get from the fixed barrel really is an advantage, and it's something that I think a lot of people overlook. And I will say every blowback fixed barrel gun that I've had has been a freaking tack driver. I've had a PPK, a PP, I've had several SIG P230s, I had a Polish P64, and those things were all tack drivers. They really were. And so is this. I mean, this is as accurate as any of those guns, maybe even more so than some of them. I'll take it. And in addition to the accuracy that is just inherent in having a fixed barrel design, the Makarov brings a level of reliability that I just didn't really find in most of the other blowback pistols I've had. I would get failures to feed sometimes in my SIG P230s, especially once the feed ramp got dirty. The Walther PPK I had, it was a 1973 PPK that was actually made in Germany. It was finicky with magazines. Like, some magazines would work fine, but then some would just drop out of the gun. And I never was really that confident in it. And plus, the thing just hurt to shoot. That's one other thing about straight blowback pistols. The recoil impulse is a bit more sharp and a bit more abrupt than what you experience with a lock breech pistol, because the lock breech kind of spreads the pressure and the recoil impulse over a longer period of time because there's more mechanically going on as the gun's firing. With this, I mean, the slide, literally, as the name suggests, blows straight back as the bullet's exploding. And, the reason for a lock breech is because at a certain point, the explosion is too powerful and this thing's going to open up before the round is done exploding, basically. So a lock breech system keeps the chamber closed for a split second longer to contain the pressure of the explosion, and so that's why you have to be under a certain power threshold to have a fixed barrel straight blowback design. Anyway, so this thing, in addition to having the accuracy of a fixed barrel gun, like I said, it's very, very reliable, and I think it's more reliable, and I want to show you why, than a lot of the other straight blowback designs. And so often this thing gets accused of being a Walther PPK knockoff, a PPK copy. And, I've had a Walther PPK and a PP, and this, other than just the idea, the concept of being a compact fixed barrel gun that's suitable for professional use, there's really not a lot in common that the Makarov shares the PP series. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the design elements in this gun that I think are really, really innovative. If you look at a PP or a PPK, you'll see that the parts are nothing alike. I mean, this is vastly different. The parts are bigger and beefier, and the Germans took care to label each part. I think that's kind of interesting. The fire control system's different, like the sear setup's different, and the mainspring's different. The mainspring in the Mac is actually a leaf spring, so it's not a coil spring like you find in just about every other handgun. But what's really unique about the Makarov is the way it beads. So I am going to take my magazine here, and I don't have 9x18 snap caps, so these are live rounds, but the slide is not on the gun. In no way can this fire. So I'm going to put this in the mag well. Whoop, excuse me. So now, one thing I want you to notice is look how high that round sits relative to the chamber. And if you look at the angle on the feed ramp here, look how shallow that angle is. If you look at feed ramps on guns that we're more used to, like the feed ramp's quite a bit steeper. So, I mean, this thing is going pretty much straight into the chamber, and that super shallow angle on the feed ramp is really going to make this thing hard for this thing to jam. And also, the way it gets put into the chamber is different than other guns. And most handguns use what's called a controlled feed sequence. The feeding round hits the feed ramp, and the back, as it kind of glances off the feed ramp, the back of the casing begins to slide up the breech face, and as the slide closes, the extractor kind of slips into the groove of the feeding round. As again, it's being fed forward into the chamber, and the whole process is controlled mainly by the extractor as it gets pushed into the chamber. So that's called the controlled feed. The Makarov doesn't work like that, and I'm going to show you the slide. This might be kind of hard to see, but if you look here, you see these two prongs. You can see it pretty well. These two prongs here, those are at the bottom of the breech face. So, and the process I just described is predicated on the back of the casing sliding up the flat breech face under the extractor hook. This doesn't work like that. It can't, and that's why those prongs are there. So what happens with the Mac, those two prongs hit the round, and it just pushes it straight into the chamber. There's no need for the case rim to slide up under the extractor hook, and then the extractor here, which you see, which is big and beefy, and you can kind of see it in there. It's a different shape than most extractors we're used to seeing. The extractor, instead of, like I said, having the case rim slide up under it as it's feeding, it just goes straight over. It jumps straight forward over the case rim. So I'm not an engineer, but that whole process seems a lot simpler. I mean, this is just straight. You just throw the thing in there and the extractor goes straight over it. It's like if, they tell you not to do this, but if you were to drop a round in the chamber of a gun with the slide locked back and then drop the slide on the chambered round, That's how this thing is designed to feed, like, all the time. That's just how it works, and those prongs there ensure that it works like that. That's hard on the extractor to do it that way of most guns, because the extractors aren't designed to handle that kind of straight-on impact. So I think that's one reason why this thing is just known for such stellar reliability, and I think that's super innovative in the way that Nikolai Makarov designed this gun. Even today, it still has that reliability that was designed, back in the 40s. Again, getting to, is this gun still relevant and useful today? So we know it's accurate. It's got the fixed barrel design, yes. We know it's reliable. It's super reliable because of the feeding mechanics that I just explained. So you've got a reliable, accurate gun, and also it's small. It's very compact, not quite as compact as a PPK. The slide is a little thicker, and it's just a little bigger overall, but it's still small. It's smaller than my P239. So here's my SIG P239, which is, pretty small, compact, double-action, single-action pistol, but, here's the Makarov. It's probably hard to get a sense of scale here, but I'll try to, put these side by side. But you can see the slide's just a little thinner, and it's just a little more compact overall. And because of the blowback mechanism, the slide is just more low profile. It doesn't have that kind of tall profile that you get with most lock breech guns. It's just easier to carry overall. So that's nice. Now, is it? I would think like a modern SIG P365 or a Smith & Wesson Shield is probably smaller and lighter than this still. Again, why would you want to carry this when you can have something that shoots 9x19, which is more powerful, and something that's smaller and lighter? And now those guns even have double stack capacity. So again, on paper, this just doesn't make any sense, but I want to go back to that accuracy that I was talking about with the fixed barrel guns. There's an anecdote. A few years ago, I didn't have this gun yet. I had a Polish P64, and I met one of my friends at the range. He had just gotten a new Smith & Wesson Shield, and we wanted to try it out, and I had my P64 with me, so I figured, I'll shoot that. I'll put a few rounds through that. I'll tell you what, that P64 just shot circles around that Smith & Wesson Shield. Tight groups. It was so accurate you could hit the numbers on the silhouette targets, and neither of us could really shoot anything approaching a decent group with that Smith & Wesson Shield. To me, that was kind of a clue. Certainly, the Shield was going to have more power and lighter, but at the end of the day, I don't know. I would rather have something that, for me, that I can get that kind of precise shot placement with. And the modern striker-fired guns just don't deliver that for me. And your mileage may vary, of course. It's not to say that, a Glock or an M&P cannot be shot accurately. Certainly they can. But for me, a hammer-fired gun with a real single-action trigger, and especially one with this fixed barrel, is going to shoot very accurately. Some downsides to a blowback system: the recoil is a bit sharper on a fixed barrel straight blowback gun, and that's something I experience on all of them that I've owned. But I will say that the Makarov, the PM, it is definitely the most comfortable to shoot out of all of them, and I think they, again, were smart with the design of this gun. The slide is a little heavier, and overall the gun is just a little larger, and the proportions are right, I think, to handle the recoil a little better. So to me, this gun is not uncomfortable to shoot. The recoil is still a bit more punchy than what you get out of a lock breech gun. You do feel it a little bit, but it's not uncomfortable. And if you haven't shot a blowback pistol, it's interesting. There's very little muzzle rise. The thing just stays so flat in your hand, and your first few shots, you're like, this thing has no recoil. And then as you shoot it, you start to realize the thing is kind of kicking into your hand a bit more than other guns. So the recoil is just different. It's not, this type of thing. It's just, it's again very kind of short, punchy, percussive. That's how I describe the recoil impulse with a straight blowback gun. But again, the Makarov, I think, is designed to make that not unpleasant, and I think it succeeds in that respect. Obviously, the biggest negative with a straight blowback system is that you're not going to get the kind of ballistics that you're going to get with a 9x19. But what is that power that you're getting with the 9x19 round really worth? The frickin' entire Soviet Union, throughout the 20th century, didn't think it was worth designing a gun with a lock breech to get those extra, I don't know, a couple hundred feet per second. But I say that a few months after Eli Dickin killed an active shooter at 40 yards with his 9mm Parabellum Glock. To this day and age, unfortunately, active shooters are an unfortunate reality, and he took care of that guy. I think it's safe to say that 9x19, 9mm Parabellum, is just going to have better ballistics at those kind of ranges. That's just unquestioned. In this day and age, maybe that factors into your decision for something to carry. Now, could this gun bring someone down at 40 yards? I think so. I shoot this at 25 yards, and it's one of my more accurate guns. I'm not that accurate at that range. The sights just kind of cover up what you're aiming at those ranges, so you're kind of just guessing. But actually, this has a thinner sight than most of my guns, so I shoot it decently at 25 yards, and the shots were in a somewhat cohesive pattern. So certainly you can make hits at distances with this gun, and I think Hickok45 proves that. If you watch his video where he reviews the Makarov, he was drilling his 80-yard gong with the Mac pretty easily, so it can reach out that far. Now, is the 9x18 round going to have enough pop at those distances to bring someone down? I mean, I think 9 of them will. In any case, there are certainly trade-offs, with any gun, and certainly I think there are trade-offs with the Makarov. But back to the kind of question at hand: is this a carry gun that makes sense in 2022? And I guess the answer is, like all things handgun related, the answer is subjective. And for you, maybe it will. If you really want that precise accuracy that the fixed barrel offers, and you want something that is just unquestionably reliable, and you want something that's double action, single action, that's a big deal. If that's what you're looking for, there's not a lot of good options out there right now that are in this size range. And as I mentioned before, the P239, which is not made anymore, is one of your smaller options for a DASA gun. There's also the Smith & Wesson 3913, which is a bit smaller than this. But to get something more compact than those, go a little bigger than a PPK, but still smaller than a SIG P239 or a Smith & Wesson 3913, here you are. And really, the only thing you're giving up to get reliability, accuracy, and DASA is that 9mm power, that 9mm Parabellum power, 9x19. To me, in most concealed carry situations that I find myself in, this is fine. But like we discussed, in this day and age, maybe it does make more sense, depending on what you're doing, where you're going, that you carry something like 9mm. And I do carry 9mm more often than this, but in the summer, when I'm going for a walk, I just want something light and small, easy to conceal, but still is shootable, gives me that confidence in its accuracy and reliability. This is a great option. 60 years old, and I still carry it. I still think it's a great gun, and I think, depending on what you're looking for, as I said, I think it's something that you could consider. These guns are old, but they're not going to let you down. They were designed to be reliable in, the toughest conditions in the Soviet Union back during the Cold War, and they're going to be reliable in the conditions that you find yourself in, and they're going to be accurate in the conditions that you find yourself in. So, in conclusion, I definitely recommend the Makarov. I think not only is it just cool and it has collector value, but I think it can and does fill a niche in even this day and age for concealed carry and self-defense. And I also want to add that I think it maybe doesn't get the credit it deserves in history for being an excellent pistol, and for what the Soviets were going for, what they needed, and the kind of guardrails they set forward with when they were looking for a handgun at the kind of beginning of the Cold War. I mean, this gun delivered, and then some. I think, as I alluded to, some of the design characteristics in terms of how it feeds and just the simplicity with which it's designed. I mean, the gun only has 27 parts in total. Nikolai Makarov, he did a great job designing this gun, and I think it's one of the the best handgun designs of the 20th century. I really do. It was prolific, and I think the things are still being used in the war that unfortunately is going on in Ukraine nowadays. I've heard that these things are still over there, getting the job done. A gun that is dependable after 70-some years of being used. I think that's endorsement that the gun is going to work for you if you decide to get one. One of these East German ones, if you can find one of those, they're a bit more pricey than the most common ones you'll find are the Bulgarian ones, and those have just come over in batches, and there's just more of them over here than ones that were made in Germany, China, or Russia. And you can find commercially made Russian ones. They're not imported anymore because of wars and stuff, but they were imported back in the 90s, and you can identify the commercially made Russian Makarovs because they have they have adjustable, like, kind of target sights on them. The East German ones like this, they were all made in like the early 60s. Like, they made just, I guess, a ton of them for a few years in the early 60s, and then they stopped making them. East German ones you'll find are all made from like 60 to 64 or something like that. But they're all good guns, and they all work well, and from what I've heard, like I said, I haven't owned a Bulgarian one, but yeah, the East German one is going to have a bit nicer of a fit and finish. So, thank you for watching, and I want to wish my little buddy here happy birthday and congrats on 60 years of being awesome, and I have no doubt that he will continue to be awesome. So, as always, I want to remind you to check out the written review on hipstertactical.com. The link is in the description. I just provide some more detail and more texture around some of the things we talked about. And there is a lot to talk about with the Makarov, just because it has such an interesting history. But next time, I will be featuring the SIG P229. This is an original OG P229 with no rail in 9mm. So that was kind of a cool find. Usually with these old P229s, they're usually in 40, sometimes in 357 SIG. So I'm writing that review, and hopefully next month I can get that up, and that should be cool. Anyway, thank you so much again for watching, and until next time, this is Hipster Tactical, and I'm Matt.